Hello and welcome back to the EVA Media World of Business Aviation podcast. Thank you for joining us, and as ever, please let us know what you think of what it is we're doing. I'm Paul Eden, editor of EVA magazine, and joining me for a return visit, which must mean the first visit wasn't all that bad, to reflect on the EBACE show in Geneva is Alex Durand, CEO of Saxon Air, Vice Chair of the British Business and General Aviation Association, and a UK Government Aviation Ambassador. Welcome back, Alex.
Thanks, Paul, and hi, nice to be back.
Well, it's great to have you. Let's talk. We'll just give some people some context here. We're talking here on the Tuesday after EBACE finished on Thursday. We're both freshly back, but before we get to that, can you give me a 3-minute pitch? What does Saxon Air do?
Thanks, Paul. So Saxon Air, we're a UK-based aviation services provider, which is a usual generic name for lots of aviation activities. So we run an aviation centre out of Norwich Airport, which is our HQ. We operate an FBO handling service from Norwich. We're the nominated agent for anything non-scheduled from Norwich Airport. About 80% of the work here is supporting offshore helicopter passengers. So we're a heliport as well. With our other hats on, we operate 2 AOCs, UK AOCs, one for jets, one for helicopters. We've got approximately 9 helicopters under our AOC for the helicopters, and I think we're on about 6 jets at the moment, mixture of light jets, CJs and Lears. And we recently expanded to opening a flight school specialising in zero to low emissions flight training, using Pipistrel Velis and Explorer aircraft, and we're expanding our training portfolio really to try and access people that haven't considered the aviation industry. And then the idea is we bring it all together with lots of complementary aviation services.
That seems like plenty to be getting on with. So I bumped into you at the EBACE show. I also saw a couple of your team who honestly were horribly young, so we won't talk about them. But
yeah, please. Yeah. Agreed.
What was your kind of big picture impression that you came away with from Geneva? Because I've heard lots of different opinions from lots of different people.
Well, yeah, it's a funny thing. Without having been going for far too long, I've, like quite a few people, specialised in saying, I'm not going, I can't wait for it not to happen, but I'll be too busy. And then you end up going and you come back and say, I'm so glad I went.
Yeah.
Every year, there's a different theme that comes out. Very long answer to this year's was the theme was very much about, will EBACE be here again? Lots of people coming, lots of discussions and ideas for different things, and then proceeding to have intense extended stays at EBACE, being extremely productive, and saying it's one of the best experiences they've had. And I think that was my takeaway. It's probably one of the most effective ones I've been to. Now, maybe I took a break last year, so maybe I've re-engaged, but it seemed to be very much, people were glad to be back and talking to each other and sharing almost the opportunity to talk about things they can't talk about anywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'll acknowledge the aisles were a bit wider. The booths were slightly scarcer than usual. Certainly the static was diminished, but people seemed to have the time and the will to sit down and have a proper conversation. And I did feel I came away with kind of more value than I had done in previous shows. So on the one hand, yes, I can see people are saying, oh, maybe the big argument is we should go somewhere a little bit cheaper. But yeah, I got a lot out of the show, and something that I have to mention that you know, go away from Geneva, great, maybe that is a good thing to do, but there is this curry house, and I shouldn't go there really, but it's on the number 18 tram route, people. It's called Desi Palace. They're not paying me. You got to go try it. It is just fabulous. But I have digressed quite horribly there. So
it's the first time I've heard of that, and I feel really bad that I've missed out. So next year, thank you.
It's a date. We have to do it. So okay, good. All right. We best talk about things other than curry. So you mentioned kind of your theme, your takeaway from EBACE. The official theme, though, was sustainability. It's a great theme. It's a major theme, but it's kind of always the theme these days. And I feel we don't get enough of, this was the theme last year. This is what we said we would do. This is what we've achieved since last year. What are your thoughts on kind of where we're going and where are the updates on progress?
I think that's a really good summary of it. It was there. I noticed it was there. It seemed a little bit less in the front of everything. Now, maybe you'd like to think it's because the industry's evolved and we're starting to embed it in what we do,
Yeah.
so you don't
Yeah.
have to make it a thing. So I'll put that as one
Yeah.
positive take on it. If I'm honest, though, I think there's probably a bit of a lull between good intention and inability to transform fully. Lots of great stuff in the pipeline, and I think it's hard to carry that momentum on some medium long term changes that just aren't going to come, within a year of the last one. Um, yeah, so it's hard to even being cynical about it. I wasn't cynical about it either. I thought it was
Mm.
right. It was in there, and yeah, I suppose my first point, maybe it's just good that maybe it's just more embedded.
Yeah, I think that's right. I do worry a little bit that sustainability might just become a word and not a word that really means an effort anymore. Um, and my personal take from this was, I was there when the associations were announcing their new initiative. I think it's called Climb Faster, something like that, which great, but the people who seemed to be fronting that initiative kind of all looked like me and you. They were all they were all us, effectively. They were copy and pastes of us.
Well, that's EBACE, but yeah.
Well, yeah, okay. But the initiative is one that will, 2050 is when we're aiming for this net zero. Um, and to achieve that, we need young people coming up. We need a more diverse selection. The people who will achieve that will be a diverse selection of people who are now quite young. And I don't see any of them being represented in the industry. I know actually SaxonAir is a big one for reaching out to young people and trying to encourage that. But I just feel it all looked a little bit staid. And I'm not going to force you to any opinions on that, but I do think we need some new
I
blood.
I think that's really interesting and relates to an apparently unrelated point in that I was on a panel which is the last one of the show, and it was how young talent engages with the industry and opportunities.
Right.
So I was representing employer, an industry leader apparently, and these were three young aviation professionals, highly impressive, and then a discussion about our take on it is establishing the industry and how we open the doorways, and then young professionals, exploring the barriers. That opened up into a really interesting discussion. There quite a lot of Q&A afterwards.
Mm.
But actually, a point that was made was, if this is the most important thing, so everyone says all the usual stuff. It's really important. Next generation must get the young, the kids involved. And Kate, who's the moderator for it, said,
Mm.
I've just thought about this. If this is the most important thing, why is it at the end of the show? Shouldn't we open up with this? And I think there's a very long way of answering your question. Is, if you got the kids to start out the show, wouldn't that drive an energy and theme to it? There were then further discussions about accessibility and encouragement, the pricing,
Mm.
how it's going to stay with people like us because people can't afford to get there, they're not supported. So maybe next year, how do we start to change the dynamic of attendance? And
Mm.
then that will change the agenda. It will naturally evolve. So I think that was about, if we talk about it, we have a panel discussion. Let's just do it next year.
Mm.
Let's sustainability. It shouldn't be a thing. It's just happening.
Yeah, right. Okay. So not so much this is what we intend to do. We've decided this is the way ahead, but actually we're doing it now. We're showing the way ahead, and here's some evidence of that. Here are some young people wandering around the hall. Wouldn't that be a spectacular
Put them in
photo?
special glass jars.
Yeah, I think no. Well, you
Oh, sorry.
perhaps not, but
Scrub
hold it
that.
up, hold it up like a little sample. Here's some sap in this jar. Here's a young person. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. We best move on before we get too controversial there. So, um, there were some standout items around the show for me. I just wonder, was there something for you, maybe a booth or a moment that happened, or an aircraft that you particularly thought that is very good? I like that very much.
Well, I think it's obvious from where it's positioned, but I've heard a lot of talk about the up and coming eVTOLs and the Lilium. It was obviously strategically located, so it could only be that because it's the first time, us industry warriors can actually look at the new stuff and play around with it. And I think it was really, so it was from that point of view, I developing more of an understanding of what it is, maybe
Mm.
what it isn't. Yeah, and I think it just sounds awful, but I was less and less interested in the static, and I was less interested in. I'd probably get shot by the OEMs that spent a lot of time and money putting their dazzling equipment in there. But
Yeah,
we operate helicopters and jets. We know what they look like. I,
sure.
I maybe that's not for me going and looking at the latest rotary or fixed wing product. But so for me, that was really interesting.
Yeah, okay. I'll come back to that in a moment. I just say, for me, I love the ACH 160 on the Airbus helicopters booth. I thought that was just so stylish. But it was the ACH 175 outside that so big. We got to crawl around it. In fact, we made a little video in there. It's got 12 seats in there, and I'm actually used to seeing the H175, but from your facility in Norwich, full of rig workers. It looked very, very different with
It's probably
nice
about to
leather
start up and
seats.
drown us out.
Well, yeah, there we go. Yeah, so that for me was a standout. But we did bump into one another, you and I, just alongside the Lilium booth. So we had a good poke around the aeroplane. Do we call it an aeroplane? The machine? I don't know. We had a good poke
Connecting
around.
device.
Yeah, we had a look in the cabin. Um, the cabin was not what I was expecting. What did you think once you stepped inside?
Yeah, it wasn't what I was expecting in a good way. I thought it
Mm,
was. I was expecting something more from the VLJ days about minimizing weight, and
yeah.
it was incredible. It was really interesting design, very
Mm,
refreshing, big,
yeah.
lots of room. Yeah, so it had that sort of Avanti style. It's bigger on
Mhm.
the inside than it looks. So yeah, I was really impressed with it.
Yeah, absolutely. What were your thoughts on the it's got a lot of motors, that thing. A lot of motors, and they're all sort of hinged on panels at the back of the wings. And I just feel there's some, if not technological, then operational challenge to all those moving, spinning parts.
Yeah, I think the poor rep, who was highly professional,
Mm,
answered. We just started firing repeated, endless operational questions,
mm,
which I think fielded very well. But yeah, I suppose from an operational point of view, and having put a lot of traditional aircraft into service, new types, existing types, and knowing how difficult that is and what the issues are, and you could only just start asking the same kind of questions, which is what it should be. Because if they're
yeah,
going to be delivered, they need to come to people like us. They are being
yeah.
delivered to a UK company who operates. So, yeah, there were, you know, it was questions about, really 30 motors. Wow, 30 things to
Mm.
go wrong in different ways.
Yes, well, that's right. Yeah, no, that's right.
Very excellent responses from the guy. And, it's so, and that's not in a way of trying to disrespect the technology. I think it's incredible.
Mm,
This is a reality, but
yeah.
there are, yeah, there were. It's a very different concept.
It is. And I think it's worth saying Lillian was out there up front, first thing you saw when you walked into the hall. It could have been any evil VTOL, and you and I would have had the same conversation about it. It's there's lots to understand. And this is the first time since 1939 there's been a genuine different type of aviation propulsion. We went from piston to jet in 39, we're now looking at electric. So it's worth saying, whatever it was, we'd have been saying, scratching our heads and saying, are you sure? But hey, we want to see it. We want to see it work. It's absolutely we do. Um, you mentioned that you were on one of the panels, and the last one, which is ironic. Okay, um, but you said watched several of them, kind of as a consumer as well, and you wouldn't normally have found the time or taken the time to sit and just sort of watch that kind of thing. So, what was it that you came away with from those various panels and your own participation?
Yeah, well, I think what a permanent for every EBACE, I mean to go to the forums. They always look
Right.
really good, lots of them, and because they've all been slightly separate,
Yeah.
I've just gone around catching up with people I've already caught up with relentlessly around the show and missed out on it. And I thought it was really good how it was blended into the show. So when I was walking to get a drink or something, I'd sit down at the table and maybe catch up on some emails, which you can never do,
Mm,
while and then listening. And meaning to just transition through, I ended up staying for I think
right.
three separate ones, getting hooked into the content. There's some really interesting dialogue. So there were obviously the sustainability panels, but they were good discussions. They were
Mm,
into the ESG side of it, and what is meaningful. A lot on the VTOL environment. So good detailed discussions with some of the leading practitioners.
yeah.
For whatever.
Well,
So yeah, I thought there was a bit cumulative. There was a I think that gave a good sense of some serious themes and discussions going around, which wasn't just go to each booth. It's sort of, there's one in particular, I think I forgot the name of the company, but the hydroplane was it? They explained the hydrogen, somebody who was just exploding with knowledge about
Right.
hydrogen.
Yeah.
And again, we're reasonably involved in that, but I hadn't realized how immediately available it is. Things like um, uh, hydrogen powered GPU. This isn't future stuff. So our big thing is, what can you do today? That's
Yeah.
brilliant. I didn't know that. And
Mm.
so that then connected me to go and look at what their booth. So
Yeah.
it wasn't a sell. It was really, I thought it worked really well.
Yeah, sure. And what about your own participation? Was that, I mean, did you feel that you got something back from that as well as just sitting up there and telling people things?
Yeah, no, I thought it was a really good one, and maybe it was because of the end of show, and I don't know, but it was, and I think having that fresh perspective,
Mm,
and it was a really good, open, honest discussion about, you know, the young professionals getting into the industry describe the barriers they see,
mm,
and then we have really open discussions about it. So it wasn't about putting veneer on things; it was acknowledging the issues and where we are with it, and that then triggered some good discussions with some of the people in the audience, and
mm,
I think we all came away. Yeah, so what's some of these things are a bit plastic, and everyone does a
mm.
pre-rehearsed line. It actually, I think, by the time it finished, we had all learned something and reflected on it,
Right.
which we take away in quite a few different ways. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's good.
Okay.
I thought, yeah,
Yeah. Um, let's address kind of the elephant in the room here, which is, the future of eBay, certainly the future of eBay at Pal Expo there in Geneva. Um, the big thing that people return to is it's very expensive. I mean, I'm sure it cost you enough just to send yourself and a couple of staff there, but people who have large booths or take jets or do that kind of thing, it's a serious proposition. Um, this year we have at least three dedicated business aviation shows because we've got Vegas and we've got MEBA this year as well. Um, so my question really is, for a start, should EBACE remain in Geneva forever, or ought it try some other European destinations?
yeah. That was definitely the theme. I thought what happened is people were almost coming into that wanting to create a frenzy of momentum to like, that's it, it's not happening again.
Mm.
What it sort of had the opposite. And this has actually been, I wouldn't have had this conversation with you about not having eBay if it wasn't at eBay.
Yeah, yeah, sure. No, that's absolutely right. Yeah,
And I thought, let's all meet up next year and talk about how we're not going to come to eBay. Um, but I think my take on it is there's something valuable about it because it's the one place where everyone does come. Everything out the Aero Friedrichs home. There are various other shows, other forums. It's
yeah.
transferred to Farnborough as well, which you could tag on a business aviation side. You've got ACE in the UK,
Hmm. Yeah,
but they're all the smaller components, if you
sure.
like.
Yeah.
So I think careful what you wish for. I
Hmm.
would happily not go in theory, but I think we would miss it. But I think I think it's a natural evolution is the industry is fundamentally changing. So fundamentally change with it. The static display maybe being more proactive and just that's not a thing anymore. There's
Mm.
a show where we come and discuss themes and serious content and showcase our latest products and services. But the new EV, where are the EV tools? Where are the drones?
Mm.
These parallel conferences either bring it all together or except it's more of a rolling evolution in different locations. A bit like when they did, was it the Euros when they went round it was hosted in Europe. We
Right.
didn't just
Yeah.
have it as a rolling thing. I know that's difficult to organise and there's a revenue side of it as well. But
Mm.
I think
Sure.
I think it's needing a freshen up in the next few years.
Yeah. Yeah. What about the prospect then of the three big business aviation shows this year? And you've said on top of that, we've got Farnborough, we've got ACE, in alternate years, we have the Paris Air Show. Um, do we really need to be traveling to Geneva, Las Vegas, and Dubai to see many of the same companies, the same aircraft? And is there a sustainability twist to all that that says actually we ought to maybe alternate shows every year or something like that?
I think that's a really good point. And I think if you did it purely and genuinely with integrity for those reasons,
Mm,
yes. If you do it just to be seen to be, yeah, we traveled a bit less. But
mm,
I think that's back to your points. If we mean it, surely this is transformational and that we do something different. Say, no, this is stupid. This is not a good footprint to leave.
mm. Mm.
Let's, like you say, let's either enhance something we're already doing, or be a bit more sparing, or make them more hybrid. There's that difference between physically being able to smell and touch and
Mm.
look at things, which has a value. But yeah, maybe like as you say, I'd forgotten it's MEBA as well, and we'll all turn up and have the same conversations see in a couple of months.
Yeah, that's right.
We will.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. You're right. Something that I ought to have thought of beforehand was, of course, we ought to have had the opinion of your two younger team members who I met on the bus going out to the static. I mean, have you had feedback from anyone else in the company who was out there? Did they enjoy themselves?
Yeah, I think it was a similar thing, and I think that is the one thing. The theme was positive. I think
Mm.
everyone got a lot out of it, a lot of the usual activities, but I think that ability just to mix and catch up with people away from the office. But there's multiple things it offers. The static is really, really good for showcasing what we all talk about. You can Google it, you can charter it, but there's no substitute for sitting in it.
No.
And that for a new team member is really invaluable. However, the cost of that means less people get the chance to do it, and that's maybe the challenge.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you as ever. We have got the Farnborough show later this year. I'm hoping you'll come back and talk to us again after that for some probably a bit more geeky conversation about planes in general, I think. So maybe we can pencil that into the diary. But in the meantime, thank you so much, Alex. It's been an absolute pleasure. And for everybody who hopefully is watching us, again, let us know what you think. Let us know if you've got any ideas for guests or subjects that we should be covering. And once again, Alex, thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul. Pleasure speaking to you.
No worries.